With suicide, the hardest thing is not really knowing why. Why is death the answer?
We lost our son Vivek, and when that happened, we were completely blindsided.
I am a 5-time suicide attempt survivor.
In February of 2014, I lost my 19-year-old son to suicide.
My husband and I had 2 children. Kurt was 22 years old, and he died in 1999. Jason was 36 years old. He really had struggled for years to stay with us.
Suicide is a difficult topic, but it's one that we must talk about. As we have seen on the news and encounter with our family and friends, there's a significant mental health crisis in the United States, and we need families to be involved to help their loved ones get better faster.
Things that are happening in the world, coupled with the things that people are experiencing in their personal life, have made it very difficult for people to cope with their stressors. They have bottled up years of struggles, problems, and experiences, and they've allowed it to have a serious impact on their mental health.
And when stressors exceed coping abilities, the risk of suicide increases. The person might look at these stressors and think that there's no escape, that there's no solution.
Unfortunately, suicide is the final action for some who struggle with mental health issues.
My son was one of those young men that struggled from anxiety and depression, but wasn't forthcoming with his illness. He lost that battle in February of 2014. From there, actually, my wife found the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and later that year, we attended our first community walk. I got involved because it's actually helpful for me. It's actually therapeutic for me, because the struggle every day I do without my son is very difficult. People who are struggling from depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, they are in pain. They truly feel pain, and all they want to do is the pain to end.
One way to approach this problem is to make sure that people get the care that they need for their mental illness before it gets to a crisis point.
One might ask, what are the reasons for suicide? There is no single one cause. We know that there's been a 30% increase of suicides over the last decade. Nationally, nearly 46,000 people died from suicide. That's about 1 person every 10 minutes. In the Lehigh Valley, 100 people died from suicide in 2020. That's more than 1 per week.
We know that suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death for the people ages 10 through 34. Nationally, 54% of suicides were by firearm. And it's unfortunate because every suicide is preventable.
When it comes to losing somebody to suicide, unless you've experienced, you don't understand the pain, especially guilt and anger that goes along with that.
You know, losing someone by suicide is very traumatic. Most people are blindsided by it. There were no warning signs that they were able to detect, and there's a lot of blame.
We named him Vivek, and the name in Sanskrit represents goodness in a human being. That's what the meaning of Vivek means. He was born in 1989. Bright kid, athletic kid, all round. He played soccer, he played tennis. Then he went to Swarthmore. He finished 4 years in Swarthmore. When he was there, that's when he developed some anxiety, and he mentioned to us, and we treated him for that. But then we thought everything was okay, and then he graduated. So he got admission into an MD program. In the summer, we went and figured out where he would stay, signed a lease. Memorial Day 2013, he said, hey, Mom, Dad, I'm not coming home. I'm going deep sea fishing with my friends. So he said, okay, you're an adult now. And he's sending us a picture holding a big fish by its mouth. So that was May. And then when June 13, he was gone. I was at work and I had a tough time just driving. I don't even know how I made it from my job to my home. It's just a 6-mile drive. It was just the most difficult drive. Everything pointed to a very bright future for this bright young man. And in the case of my son, he typed out a very nice letter. He's concluding that I and my wife and my younger son would be better off if he were not in the picture. Ajay, to be quite honest, misses his older brother like nothing else. He was the most loving brother that Ajay could have. Ajay still hasn't gotten the idea that his brother is never coming back. I only wish that he had confided in us, that he had given us a chance to help him. Would we have succeeded? I don't know, but at least we would have tried.
There is significant stigma that affects mental health. There is absolutely no shame in asking for help.
Well, people that experience stigma often avoid seeking treatment. They don't feel they belong to their community, and they are limiting themselves from getting treatment.
Stigma is learned. It's not something that kids are born with. People who are dealing with suicidal ideation or suicide attempts are labeled as attention-seeking or just being dramatic, when in reality we are crying out for help, and we need somebody to be that support system for us.
We can reduce the stigma associated with mental illness. Youngsters can be taught that mental illness can be treated, just like any other physical illness. If with the right care, we can be very productive, we can be happy in life.
Knowing you're not alone is so important. I think it's important to tell your stories, as painful as they might be, when you're ready to tell them.
Suicide does not discriminate. We do know by looking at trends that there are certain populations and age groups that might be more vulnerable. It might affect one gender more than the other. But on the most basic level, everyone is vulnerable and susceptible to self-violence. And that means suicide can affect anyone or any family.
John, oh my God, he was just sort of larger than life. God, he could tell a story like nobody could tell a story. And that was him, his laugh, his stories. But I think most people would say that he was a big soul. Just a regular old day, went to work and just had this crazy sense that I needed to go home. John didn't return my call and hadn't heard back. Pulled in, of course, and his car was there. Went immediately up to the upstairs, and he was not in the bed. And I went down the steps to where the office was, and the light was off, so I turned to the laundry room to the right, and nobody was in there. Turned to the left and saw the basement door was open, and the light was on. And so I went down and I turned the corner, and he was just there. Thought, oh my God. He shot himself. I think he shot himself. And I just stood there looking like, I can't go near. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid to go near him. It was just surreal. It was crazy. And so I turned around and I had my phone in my hand and I dialed 911. And from there it was kind of a swirling hell. The realization came to my mind that I was then gonna have to call my children and tell them that he was gone. And I remember at one point just thinking, this is your life. This has happened, and there is no turning this around. You have to grieve it, get your children through it, but you must go forward. It's just insane. It was insane that this would be happening to us because John wasn't under the care of a doctor, he wasn't suffering that we knew of, and it was gonna be really hard not to have any answers.
It's important to educate people on the warning signs of suicide. There are many factors that can lead to suicidal thinking, including job loss, relationship loss, financial issues, or other stresses and challenges.
thoughts about suicide is an emergency. A person could have passive thoughts where they don't want to be alive, might think that people are better off without them, or where they think that it would be reasonable to harm themselves. They may have a plan to do something dangerous.
There are a number of warning signs, either for yourself or for others, and those could include significant changes in sleep patterns, in eating, changes in social activities and friends, not taking part in activities that you used to enjoy, increased use of alcohol or substance abuse.
Giving away personal belongings, writing a suicide note, talking a lot about death. Those would be some of the things that we look at traditionally.
My husband and I had 2 children, Jason and Curtis. My husband was a Boy Scout leader, and so the boys were very active in Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts. Jason was full of life, loved to have a good time. Curtis was a little more of a bookworm. Kurt was an old soul. In 1992, he decided to take the boys out to the Grand Canyon. And on that trip, Kurt became very, very moody. He showed a different personality than we were used to. He, of course, would go off to school, and when he came home, he would go up to his bedroom and close the door. I was working evening shift, and I came home around 11:30 at night, and my husband met me at the door and said that we needed to take Kurt to the hospital right away because he had taken an overdose of Tylenol. We learned that he had a mental illness, and we also learned that Kurt was discovering that he was gay and was afraid to tell us as parents. After high school, Kurt went off to college. He had ups and downs in college. There were several suicide attempts. Kurt managed to graduate magna cum laude, and he received a full ride for his PhD in mathematics. After 2 weeks into the school year, had a psychotic episode and needed to be hospitalized. He was in and out of the hospital several times, and then finally, in the beginning of November, Kurt felt that he was ready to go back. He actually taught a math class, and he came home and he said he just did really well. And then the next day, he did not have the energy to go into school. That Friday, my husband came home from work at lunchtime to check on Kurt and found that he had gone out in the morning, purchased a gun for $100, and shot himself. And Kurt was 22 years old, a beautiful human being. At that time, we're also dealing with our other son, Jason, who was exhibiting signs of major depression. Jason graduated from high school. He started school in September, and we thought he was going to class. But at the end of the semester, we realized that he had not been going to class at all. So he came home and he isolated himself. We wanted him to see a professional, and he resisted. At one point, Jason decided that he didn't want to live anymore. And so he drove up to the Poconos, parked by a hiking trail, went into the woods, and was going to end his life. So for 3 or 4 days, folks looked for him in the woods. After 4 days, one of the rescue workers found him. He was transported to Lehigh Valley Hospital. He was there in the hospital for 2 months, and then he was transferred to Allentown State Hospital, and he was there for a year. When Jason was released, he was transferred to a community residence, and he was doing really well. We were seeing the old Jason again. 1 month he went for his white blood cell test, and the white blood cells had decreased so much that it was life-threatening, and they had to take him off the medicine immediately. The professional folks worked for, many months trying to get the right medicine for him that would do the same thing that this miracle medicine did for him. In June of 2012, Jason took his own life. Jason was 36 years old, and he had been dealing with mental illness since he was 18. People ask me if I'm mad at my children, and I can't even, that thought never even crossed my mind. How could I be mad at these beautiful children who suffered so much? It's not even a feeling that I would consider.
It's important to listen to other people and to hear what they're struggling with.
It's okay to talk about this. Bringing up the idea of suicide is not going to put the idea in someone's head.
There's a 5-step action plan for someone in emotional pain. First, ask how they are. Next, keep them safe. Reduce their access to lethal items. Be present with the person struggling. Be there for them. Studies show that talking about suicide may lessen suicidal thoughts. Connect them with a professional, whether it be their primary care doctor, mental health worker, or psychiatrist. And stay and support them by staying in touch after a mental health crisis.
Studies suggest that the number of suicide deaths decrease when someone follows up with the at-risk person.
When people express a need for help, don't deny them that help. And I wish my son had said something like that.
I am a 5-time suicide attempt survivor. I was diagnosed as a junior in high school with depression and anxiety. I was bullied in high school. At the time, I was in an abusive relationship. And so things that I once used to love, they were no longer my escape. They were something that I didn't want to go to anymore. I couldn't find the enjoyment because I knew it wasn't a safe place. Dealing with hard things at home, school, trying to figure out where I fit in the world. And it was just really overwhelming. That's what kind of got me to the breaking point with suicide. I remember thinking that I don't want to die, I just want the pain to stop. And I couldn't find a way out, a way to make that pain stop. I remember walking into the crisis counselors at my high school and saying that I was walking a fine line between giving up and seeing how much more I could take. And so I did outpatient treatment during my senior year of high school, and that was finally when I learned that it's okay to not be okay and that I wasn't alone in what I was going through. I am somebody who has struggled with depression, anxiety throughout middle school, high school, and college. But I'm here today as Miss Berks County, as a children's book author, as a school counselor. There's so much that can be hidden behind a smile. Looking at me today, somebody sees me at an event with a crown and a sash on. They don't think I'm somebody that lives with mental illnesses until they get to know me. I will be celebrating 7 years since my last suicide attempt, and I fully believe that the reason I'm here is to be able to make a difference and to share my story with others.
When a person loses someone to suicide, it's one of the worst tragedies. And a life loss doesn't affect the person who lost her life, but it affects a number of people.
For every one person that dies by suicide in the United States, 135 people are touched by that suicide.
With time, support, grieving is a process, and it's a process that's experienced differently between people.
You know that saying, it takes a village. Wow, do I have a village? I have the most amazing group of family and friends who didn't really leave our side for 6 months. I would tell people who are going through this to give yourself a break and let people help you. The support of friends that I had was just invaluable. I couldn't have done it without them.
There was always somebody at home to give us company and console us and take care of us. Because initially we were looking for reasons, why? And that was only causing us more agony, saying, did we miss something? Because it was more a question of, we are parents, we should be protecting our children. And one of my friends basically said, CB, stop, this has happened. Let's just celebrate his life. Let's just remember him for all the goodness that, that he represented.
You go back to yourself and, oh my God, what could I have done? What should I have done? Oh my God, I remember saying this on Tuesday, and maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe that was a trigger. And what I learned in therapy for myself was that John made decisions for himself.
It's still hard for me to get up in the morning. I struggle with that on many days. Once I'm up and figure out a plan for the day, I can go forward, but it still is hard. For someone who's lost someone that they love, I would offer to sit with them in silence whenever they needed, and I would offer to be there whenever they needed someone to talk to. Support groups and therapy is very important.
For a person to cope with such a loss, there are bereavement groups. There's ways to understand themselves better.
The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention is the largest not-for-profit organization dedicated to suicide prevention. We have advocacy for mental health funding, mental health support, suicide prevention research, as well as programs to educate our community, our schools, around how to help somebody who may be struggling, and support for people who have lost somebody to suicide. We have a network of people within the community so they understand they're not alone.
Each one of us has a way of coping with this situation. My wife, she's big on cardinals, and I think there is a belief that when a person passes away, their spirit takes the form of a cardinal. Now, every time there's a cardinal, she say there's Vivek. If somebody is struggling to get up out of bed and kind of say, how am I going to survive this day? Trust me, you can do well. And by being happy, doing the things that make us happy, we are not dishonoring or disrespecting the memory of our loved one.
It doesn't get any easier. The peaks and valleys go further apart, but when they hit, they're as high and they're as low as like right now. I'm 8 years from his loss, and it'll still hit me as hard as it did the very first time. The one thing we want to tell survivors of suicide loss is they're not alone. The person you lost, it's not the person you raised. It's not the person you knew. They were overcome by a disease, and it's no different than cancer. It's no different than a heart attack or any kind of terminal illness. They were actually overcome by a disease.
Like cancer, mental illness is a disease, and it can be treated.
We are so lucky in the Lehigh Valley. We have many providers, hospital systems, government agencies like the county services, individual agencies like NAMI, all of whom care so much about people in the community and really want to help.
We want to prevent every suicide that we could prevent. At Lehigh Valley Health Network, we have many programs to help anyone who is struggling with mental health or suicidal ideation. One can call the national hotline, the crisis number for the county. They can speak with nearly anyone in their network, and they will get the help that they need.
I made the decision very early on that the kids and I would go to see a therapist together almost immediately. Through Lehigh Valley Hospital, they were able to hook us up with a therapist. And for me, it was important for us all to sort of say how we felt about it and just how we were dealing at that moment.
When you are struggling with mental illnesses or suicidal thoughts, it's easy to fall into the trap of black and white thinking, all or nothing. And so having somebody be that rational voice for you can make a difference.
A warm handoff is where we connect patients to local county's caseworkers to ensure that the patients have adequate follow-up after they've been discharged from our hospital. This will clearly help engage patients to stay in touch with their providers and in active treatment.
Everyone has a part in suicide prevention.
Don't be ashamed. If you know someone that is struggling with depression or experiencing suicidal thoughts, please seek help. Please help them in seeking the help that they need. There's treatment available.
For people suffering with mental health issues and families struggling with the loss of loved ones, hope is important.
The iris is a symbol of hope. Hope can sometimes seem like an elusive thing that you don't deserve when you're struggling with mental illnesses. I believe everybody needs to have some sort of hope, something to hold on to, and that can be as simple as knowing you have a package coming in the mail.
One of the things that gives me hope is the increased awareness of mental illness and of suicide.
In my mind, there's always hope.
Hope is the very last part of what we cling to when we're having a difficult time.
Everyone can find something that allows them to feel good about themselves and pull on with life.
There's a lot of gifts along the way on this journey, and keep your eyes open and your heart open to receive them, because those little gifts keep you going from one day to the next when you're in really tough waters.
One should never lose hope. There's always help available.
If we can kind of hold on to that hope and build off that hope, then we can help each other out.
There is hope. Seeking psychiatric treatment is, in a sense, like setting yourself free.
It takes the entire community to answer the call to give me shelter. Through education, awareness, and community partnerships, we can all work together to eliminate suicide.
So often people come to us looking for a safe place to share their experiences or seek support, and they really are saying to us, give me shelter. Not physical shelter, but shelter from the emotional storm that they're experiencing.
People need love and care and support, and we have to answer the call to give me shelter.
One of the things that people who are in crisis, what they want, is they want somebody to just engage them, talk to them, and listen to them. And in that regard, you can actually provide shelter.
Give me shelter means to provide the basic support that an individual needs so that that individual can go forward with healing.